Great. Welcome, everyone. I see more and more people joining. It's so great to have you potentially again or for the first time. My name is Paula, and I'm here today with Simon, as usual. And today we're going to talk about small talk. But before we dive into everything, as you zoom in, as you settle in, type in where you're joining us from. We always love to know these sessions are super diverse. We have people from all around the world. And so it's always great to hear where you're from, what you think about the different topics we're going to talk about today. And if you feel comfortable with it, drop in your job title. That sometimes also gives us a hint of the kind of audience that we have today, and also understanding a bit what your opinions and thoughts and questions may come from. So Simon, we talked about small talk. What are we going to discuss today?
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of these things, I think one of these topics that we always find that are really popular because it's something that when you consider like business English and doing this kind of thing, it doesn't seem like a very kind of popular topic, but actually it's one of the ones that we hear all the time. People want to know about. I mean, and this is like from all different levels of people that we talk with. It's always like, I want to feel more comfortable with my small talk. I want to be able to build trust with my colleagues, my boss, my employees, whatever. And so this is, we're going to give a lot of really clear, examples and takeaways on how you can do this and how you can start doing it right away. So I think, one of the things that we always say with these is that these webinars are always as effective and as fun as they are for our participants that are engaging. So, ask questions throughout today. Ask questions in the chat. Let us know where you're zooming in from, and we're going to answer any questions that you have today. So as we go through, if you're not sure about something or you're curious, just ask away and we'll be happy to answer your questions. So before we jump into this topic, let's, just really quick because we always get new people on these webinars, and sometimes we have people that come back after from last month because we do these webinars every month. So we want to know if this is your first time at a Talaera webinar. If it is, welcome. We're so happy that you're joining. And if it is not, welcome back. We're glad that you came back. Paula, can you tell everybody here just a little bit about what Talaera is? What do we do? Just so that everybody is on the same page.
Yeah, so here actually I just launched a poll and asking all of you if this was your first time, and I'm seeing that for about 40% of you, it is the first time. So just briefly, what we want to say, just so that you also understand where we're coming from, is that we are Talaera, and what we do is we help non-native English professionals communicate with confidence in the workplace and also connect across cultures, because English communication is so much more than grammar. So what we do is we cover topics like cross-cultural communication, confidence, participating in meetings, email writing, a little bit of grammar and vocabulary if you need to, but it's so much more than that. And we do that through one-on-one courses, webinars, just like now, self-study. So we have a great platform that's still open for free until the end of the year. So we have a great range of different topics and offers. So if you're interested later, just drop us a message and we'll share more. So that's a bit about Talaera. Super quickly about us. My name is Paula, and I come from a background in translation, cultures, psychology of work. I'm currently a mix of head of marketing and also doing things like this, like webinars and the podcast. So yeah, that's a bit where I come from. All these topics I'm super passionate about. And I know, Simon, if you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, but I know you're super passionate about all this as well.
Yeah, so my name's Simon Kennel. I'm the People and Culture Manager here at Talaera. And yeah, similar to Paula, I have a background in, English training, but also learning and development in HR. And so, yeah, whenever I can, I like to join these and get back into my training boots. And we've both lived in several cultures. So, these topics where we discuss cross-cultural communication are always really fun because we can think about our own experiences. And, as well, when I say that, I think it would be great today because we have people from all over, is we want you to share your experiences and we want you to tell us if what we're saying, if you agree with it or if you don't, let us know. This is all a learning opportunity for everybody today. So just make sure that you're really taking advantage of that as we go through. So, what are we going to be talking about today? Well, today we're breaking it down into three main sections, right? So, our first one, we're going to be talking about just in general small talk across cultures. Like, what does that actually mean? Because there is actually a cultural difference that we'll see when we're, just navigating small talk in different cultures. Then we're going to be talking about how to actually start and then how to stop small talk, which are two like very important points. We always hear the question like, how do I even like jump in? Sometimes I'm so nervous that I just start the meeting. I don't do the small talk, right? But we know the small talk's important. So we're going to be talking about how to start, how to engage, and then how to end, how to transition. And those are two very clear points there. And again, like I said, as we go through, make sure you ask questions because we have so much to cover today. Um, this is a big deal, right? Like we wouldn't do a whole hour on this topic if we didn't know that it was such a big part of our lives and such a big part of our communication. I mean, here is just like a great example that really, when you think about how much of your communication is small talk, it's, whether it's gossiping or just catching up or all of these things, right, that we're trying to do. Very often a big part of that is like considered small talk. That becomes really difficult when we try to do that in our second language, right? If your second language is English, how do I do that? How can I be me in a second language? And that's a real challenge that we find. So it is a big challenge when it's 1/3 of all of our speech, right? But as we go through, let's like really quickly stop and then actually discuss like what is small talk. And I want you here in the chat to add here, what is small talk? When we talk about small talk, what is it? I mean, I think for myself, like I like to think about it as like the kind of beginning transition before we get to the serious part of it. And again, we're thinking about in a business situation, right? How about for yourself, Paolo? What's considered a small talk?
Right. So small talk is this kind of light, informal conversation that it's hopefully about non-controversial topics. And it's that type of communication that doesn't go too much into detail, but allows you to establish some sort of rapport or connection with the other person. And that's exactly the purpose, right? We want to find some common ground and we want to establish connections, build rapport with others. So even though it's small talk, it's far from small. It's actually a big deal, especially in business communication. So I know a couple of you said, I want to know if there's some faux pas when in international small talk to avoid or how to sound intelligent. We'll talk about exactly that because small talk for some people is easier than for others. But when we're talking with people that we don't know so well, and especially when they're from different cultures and different backgrounds, it can get a little tricky. So that's a bit what we're actually going to talk about today. Um, we we can skip this part and actually get to the nitty-gritty of today. This one is I think it's funny. I can relate to it, right? Like pretending to enjoy small talk, and you're there like, I'm also thinking about all the work piling up. Do you ever feel this way?
Yeah, I mean, this is like kind of one of these things that I think we should talk about just very quickly is that we know small talk can be awkward in some situations, especially when we're going to talk about this kind of culture difference when it comes to small talk that can often either be that one person is like not engaging in small talk, or the other person is maybe talking too much. And then there can be this kind of mismatch there, right? And it can often lead to this like awkward kind of situation. So we want to just like preface that we know that there is this kind of awkward aspect to it, but that's okay. And we're going to work through kind of some of these things. Some quick initial tips, Paula. What can we do if we're in a business situation and we're maybe not feeling super comfortable, but we know we should probably do some small talk? What are some quick initial tips that we can take into consideration?
Right. So we have a few, and we'll dive a little deeper into the actual cultural differences and then some great recipes to engage in small talk. But some initial tips are, first, do your research. If you're having a meeting, then make sure you know who's attending, where are they located, is there anything I should know about that place? Like just a quick Google search would actually make a difference. I mentioned earlier, I had a call last week with a client. She was lovely, from the opposite side of the world. And as soon as we started the call, she told me that she had Googled my name to make sure that she would pronounce it correctly. And that was such a small thing for her to do, but it was so thoughtful. And it just started, it sparked a conversation. So do your research a little bit in advance, mimic the other person. So here's a bit adapting to their communication style. If they're very chatty, then it's okay for you to be a little bit more chatty. If they're a little bit more quiet, then it's we don't need to push, right? We don't need to force the conversation. In general, this is great in life, a great tip in life. Ask more and try to speak less. Learn how to ask good questions. That's also a podcast that we have on Talaera Talks, if you're interested in it. And when you ask, use open-ended questions. Simon, what do we mean by that? Ask open-ended questions, and why is it so important?
Yeah, so open-ended questions are really powerful, and we're big fans of thoughtful questions here at Talaera because they can really, really change the whole line of communication. And when we're asking open-ended questions, basically we're asking questions that don't end in a yes or a no answer. So with an open-ended question, instead of asking something like, you know, do you like food? Right? That is a pretty, you're leading that person into just a corner, right? Instead of that kind of question, we can ask a question like, what kind of food do you like? Or what are some popular foods in your region? Or something like that, right? And so there you're opening up the question so that you can get a lot of different responses and then go from there. And that gets the kind of the ball rolling for your conversation to take on more and more.
That's right. Also focus on similarities. When we talk with people from all over, we'll find many different aspects in which we are similar, but many others in which we're different. And here the focus is to build connections, right? It's not to decide who's right, who's wrong, who's better, who's worse. It's about finding that common ground. So always focusing on similarities. We hosted this session this morning, and one of the questions was, oh, sports is a great topic to talk about, but what if we're from different teams? Well, why don't you focus on the fact that you actually like that sport instead of focusing on, oh, yeah, no, but we support different teams. So that's a bit the mentality that we want to have when we get into small talk. Learning that not all silences are bad. And here, it's also very cultural dependent. Simon, how does it feel for you when we talk about silences in small talk?
Yeah. So we always talk about these kind of interactions. And like we mentioned, sometimes in some situations you can feel a little bit awkward or a little bit shy. And for me, one of those situations is when it comes to silences. In some cultures, it's very common for there to be no silences in a conversation. You're just kind of talking over each other like this, and you kind of overlap in your conversation. Whereas in other cultures, like if we go far east, like Japan is a great example, conversations are very often one person speaking and then a pause and then the other person answering. And that's a big difference, right? So sometimes, you'll see this clash where people may, misunderstand silence for being that someone isn't truly understanding your question, or, they may just continue speaking, right? So, understanding that in this cultural kind of aspect, not all silences are bad, and this is one thing to watch out for. Especially if you're coming from one of those cultures where you're always talking above each other. And if you're from one of those cultures, let us know and tell us which culture you're coming from, because I can say, at least in the US, it's very much like we're speaking on top of each other.
Yep, exactly that. And really reading between the lines and understanding what the dynamics are. And then
Yeah.
also timely wrap up. That would be the last tip here for our initial tips. And that means we'll talk about when to end and how to end small talk, but it's important not to take over too much. So it's great. We've had a few questions back and forth we've exchanged some information, then it's good. Let's move on. It doesn't have to last forever. So here we have some initial tips that we wanted to share, right? But here, this might be my favorite part of the whole webinar. How does it differ across cultures? And here, we have a conversation, right? So we have, hi, Alex, it's a pleasure to meet you. How are you doing today? And then Alex says, good, great. Well, thanks for taking the time to hop on a call and review our product. You're welcome. How do you feel about this conversation? This is how I feel.
Yeah, that's definitely how I feel. I've been in this situation before where, and if you've been in this situation, let us know, because for me, it's like I've been in this situation now enough times where I'm working across cultures where I don't take this personally. I just kind of continue rolling. Of course, I would rather it be not this way, but I really, I've been there. And maybe I've had bad days where I'm playing Alex. So, so yeah, so this is like a tough one. But then we have kind of the opposite here. Um, and we have something totally different. And as Paula is reading through this, I want you in the chat to let us know what is different about Alex's responses here today as opposed to this previous one. So what is different that we're seeing in this conversation and in the way that Alex is responding?
So let's see if you can spot the differences other than the obvious. So we have the same question initially, and we have, hi, Alex, it's a pleasure to meet you. How are you doing today? And then Alex replies, I'm doing well, thanks. The sun's shining here in Poland, so I can't complain. How about yourself? And then the other person says, well, nice, doing well also. It's been a busy week here, but the weather is nice as well, so I'm doing okay. Have you been trying to close some big projects before the end of the quarter? Actually, not really. We just have an upcoming team retreat. So I'm trying to finish a few things. Nice. Where's your team going? And so the conversation goes on for a bit longer. What are the main differences that you spot here? How has Alex been different, or how has his reaction been different from before? Gabriela says he engages in conversation rather than providing minimal answers, for sure, 100%.
Yeah,
And how
definitely.
does he do that? Specifically, how does he engage in conversation? The person's really listening. Yep. What else? What are some?
I like the active listening. Yeah. I mean, in the second response here, right? You know, the first person says, yeah, it's been a busy week. And then he's saying, okay, oh, are there any big projects, right? So really actively listening and then taking what you actually heard and then responding. And that's just, it sounds so simple, but it's actually like the most effective way to ensure that a conversation is continuing.
That's exactly it. And we have Susanna said he gives details about himself and asks the other person back. That is key. And Laura also said give and take is fairly equal. So the conversation is much more
Yeah.
equal. Exactly that. The person's
Yeah.
not in a rush. Exactly. They're there, they're present, they're
Yeah.
focused on making that connection. So yeah, we see that there's a big difference in here. So we're going to see how can we get there? How can we get to that situation? So this one is a bit better. An open-ended question, Marla, you got it. That's what we said at the beginning. That's right. So brief disclaimer here. We're going to talk about culture, and this is a bit of a tricky topic always. We talk from utter respect. We've both lived abroad for many years, and we're passionate about this. We've read a lot about this topic. but it's important to know that it's a very complex one. So when we think about culture, we think about the obvious, right? Food, clothes, holidays, art, laws, language. But just like with an iceberg, and this is a model by Edward Teahoe, and from many years ago, where he described culture as an iceberg. So we have all the visible parts like behaviors and practices. There's so much more below it. There's the way we perceive time, there's our customs, there's our morals, there's even gender roles differences, right? And even the meaning of life. So here it's important to know that things are very complex. People are very complex. So what we're going to give today is some general guidelines, but it's very important to get to know people as individuals. So we just wanted to bring that up and make that super clear. So if we say in general, people from this culture do this and that, doesn't mean that everyone's going to do that. So
Yeah.
very important to know. The Culture Map
And
is a great book as well. Sorry, Simon.
definitely. I was just gonna say, great book, great book. And what we always say when we're going through and discussing culture aspects is that, this is not meant to be like a clear kind of definitive guide of this person is from here, so this means they do X, or this person is from here, they do Y. The goal here is that it's to understand that there is a kind of deeper game and to be aware of that game when you are working in an international setting. And as much as you're aware of that game, that will help you to navigate it. So it's not necessarily responding to this with this. It's more about understanding that there is a game and how to navigate that. And if you can do that, you can much more quickly build trust. You can, navigate these situations. You can negotiate. You can do all of these things much more quickly if you kind of know the game that you're playing and you're able to navigate it. So let's start kind of with a basic, very fundamental step one principle when we're talking about cross-cultural communication, peach and coconut cultures. And as we talk about these, I want you to tell us, which one are you from? Are you from more of a peach culture, or are you from more of a coconut culture? Paula, what are these and why are they important?
Right. So we just talked about how complex cultures are, and now we're just presenting a very simplistic and simple description. So that is something to bear in mind. This is a very simple representation of cultures, but it helps us understand a bit how we make small talk. So we have peach cultures that are super soft and sweet on the outside. They're friendly, they're smiling, even if they don't know you. They use first names, not all of them, like Japan usually doesn't use first names if they don't know you well. They share, they ask, but then you get to the hard pit. It's very hard to actually get to know them very well. And then we have coconut cultures. They're a little bit rough on the outside. They're a little bit hard. So they feel a little bit closed off at the beginning. They don't smile at strangers on the street. They don't ask personal questions initially, but then you get to the center, and it's very sweet and it's softer. So that represents the fact that they take a little bit longer to build relationships, but then once you do, then everything's much easier, and they believe in long lasting relationships. We have coconut for sure, peach, coconut, definitely coconut. I think my culture is somewhere in between. Gabriela, where are you from? So that we know. And of course, many cultures are in between. Argentina. Oh, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, it could be somewhere in between. I agree. Yeah. So again, this is just a framework for us to understand where they're coming from and how we can navigate that. In terms of how long small talk should last, here we have a few countries. Of course, we cannot talk about all of them. We have Switzerland, Finland, Germany, Poland, Spain, Mexico, Colombia, and then the MENA region like Egypt and so on. Um, I'd love to know either where you're from and then the number of minutes that it usually takes, or if you think you know about these ones. Simon, you're in Denmark. Where would you place it here? How many minutes would you say?
Yeah, so Denmark definitely, I wouldn't say more than 5 minutes, especially in a professional setting, maybe as low as like 2 to 3 minutes. Um, and that would be very basic, like, oh, where's your office located? Okay, how long have you been with the company or something like that, or what, or just the weather, and then it would be like very quickly changed over. So yeah, very not a lot, not a lot. How about Spain? What do you think? What do you think that one would be?
Yeah, I think Spain might be somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes. And
Mhm.
here it depends. I see a lot of 10 minutes in the chat. And as we become more and more global, then everyone tends to find some common ground. So like 5, 10 minutes sounds like a fair amount of time for international business. But in Spain, if it's between Spanish people, then I would say 10, 20 minutes. Um,
Interesting. Interesting.
sounds right.
What are people saying in the chat? I'm curious.
Yeah, so we have Mexican, Canadian, 10-ish, Ukraine, 10. Here in Argentina, if it goes unchecked and the interlocutors know each other, it can last over half an hour.
Okay.
Love it. Colombia, I think it would be 10 minutes, but it depends on the context. Of course, it depends on the
Yeah,
context. So what we actually have here is Switzerland and Finland. It's almost no small talk, although we do have someone here that lives who lives in Finland, and she said no more than 10 minutes. So that makes
interesting.
sense.
All right.
Germany, usually less than 5 minutes. Poland, about 10. Spain, as we said, 10, 20. Here we have Mexico and Colombia, but we would have many of the Latin American countries. Of course, there's many differences between countries, but in general, could be 30 minutes. An hour might be too much, but here we also account for the relationship building time where you're not actually working, you're just building that relationship and getting to know the person. And then in many countries in the MENA region, we have hours and hours. Of course, sometimes this is too much, but it is it is a bit of a generalization. So that is in terms of how long, and it goes back to how we build trust. And the cultures that usually spend less time on small talk, it's usually because the way they build trust is through tasks. I trust you because you are on time. I trust you because you do what you say you do. I trust you because you are very professional. Versus other cultures where they build trust through relationship building is very different. They think long-term reliability. They spend much more time getting to know you. We both lived in Vietnam, and I remember for my manager and many of my friends' managers in general, and my Vietnamese friends all agree with that, is that usually managers invite you for drinks after work. And that is their way of getting to know you truly as a person outside of work. That doesn't happen everywhere, really. So that's something just to consider. What is important? There's no right or wrong. It's just understanding, okay, what do this other person values? And how am I going to bridge that gap to actually build that trust and make connections?
Yeah,
How,
I think if
oh,
I could just add on there, I mean, I think like this is a great way to kind of think about yourself as first, like just to do a personal audit is like, do I build work relationships more around getting to know that person? And if I know that person, I feel like I can trust them, or do I build work relationships more around that person said that they would do X and then they did that. So now I trust them. I know for myself, definitely I'm more on the left side with the task-based trust, just because that is like really a lot of the culture that I live in and that I come from is that, if we don't really know each other, the only way that we're gonna build any type of trust is if you follow through with what you said you would do. And it's, in every version of our society, it's that same kind of task-based trust. And then from there we build a relationship. But that's the way that it really goes. So, I think it's always an interesting thing to look at yourself first and see, okay, where do I fit in here? And that's a good first step.
absolutely. That's a great point. So once we understand a little bit more how people across cultures understand small talk and how and why they value it. We have a few, some are quite obvious, but we just want to, test the waters before we actually talk about what's safe for work and what isn't. No right or wrong answer, no judging, but we'd love for all of you to participate. So here we have some small talk fragments that we have actually heard, and we want to know if you think they're safe for work or not. The first one is, hey, Simon, you've gained weight. You were too skinny before. We have a
Okay, you said there's no right or wrong answers here, okay? So maybe should we say that there maybe are some wrong answers
maybe,
here? Okay,
maybe.
so let us know in the chat if which ones of these are wrong answers because I just want to be sure that we're making it very clear. Are people helping me out? I need some help here. Is A safe or not safe for work?
Definitely not. I think we all agree that A is not safe for work. It is common though, and that's why we added it there. It is common in some cultures to talk about body weight when it comes to making small talk. In general, it's not a good idea in an international business, so avoid it. B, the weather's beautiful here. How's it there where you live? I think we all agree that that is great, safe,
Yeah.
expected, as Eugenia said. See, I'm reading a great book about world history. Are you reading anything good? What do we think about this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's safe. Unless it was like I'm reading a great book around, a very sensitive political or historical issue. Like, are you reading anything good, right? So like, something like this, I think is, yeah, I think it's safe. What about D? I'm interested to hear what people have said. Safe or not safe?
Yeah, so we have, are you married? How did you and your husband or wife meet? How safe is that one? D is common in some cultures, Diana says. Yes, we've seen it, and it is common. Samara said D is intrusive. D depends on the context, and people here ask a lot, but some people find it invasive.
Hmm.
Exactly that. So it is common in some cultures, but we're talking about a multicultural setting and we're talking about work. So in general, we want to avoid that one unless you really, really know the other person.
Yeah.
Would just stay away from it. And E, everyone agrees, definitely no. E is a no, no, no. I'm very upset about the recent elections. I hate the new president. Politics, it's usually a pretty bad topic to talk about. We're all on the same page here. So what
Great.
are safe topics then? What can we talk about? What are safe topics for small talk at work?
Yeah, so safe topics. I mean, the weather is like, yeah, standard. Sports, food, holidays, like those are all kind of more general topics. I think if you're traveling anywhere, things like that, these are all kind of safe topics, right? Whereas topics to avoid, like we mentioned, anything with like personal appearance or weight, things like that typically like money, especially if we're talking about like salary. I mean, I know salary transparency, at least here in the Nordics, is like becoming very, very like, big and everybody's talking about it. But like definitely if you're working internationally, you want to avoid that gossiping. And then yeah, anything around like typically religion or asking like very personal religious questions, things like that. We want to avoid, right? Now there may be situations where someone else hasn't, joined a Talaera webinar and doesn't know this and asks you one of these questions and these topics to avoid, right? And, that's a difficult one. I mean, Paula, like, how would you handle that in a situation like that if someone asks like one of these questions?
Yeah, we actually have some great phrases that you can use when so I'm just going to keep a little bit of I'm going to build a little bit of
Yeah, we'll
but we
get
do
to
have
that.
some
We'll get to that.
phrases that you can use when someone crosses the line for you. We have two questions here that initially look very different, but they have something in common with that Venn diagram. We have how you doing and did you eat today? And they are actually very similar in the sense that how are you doing is usually our way of saying hello and engaging in very superficial small talk in the West, like in the US is very common, in many parts of Europe as well. And did you eat today is again a very general small talk question in some parts of Asia. It happened to me when I lived in Vietnam. I would go get to work. And then my boss would ask me, did you have breakfast today? Did you eat today? And it was the first time for me that someone other than my mom would ask me that. And I was very surprised. And it's just another way of saying, hey, how you doing? How are things? So here it's also important to know who the other person's asking and what their expectations are in terms of an answer. Even how you doing? We have this meme here, like, I'm not sure if they're being polite or they're actually interested in what I have to say, right? So if you, when I lived in Germany, for example, how you doing would expect, or people would expect a more in-depth answer. So they would actually expect an answer from you. And if you go to New York, people are, hey, how you doing? Yeah, how you doing? So you don't even have to answer. You can just answer back with the same question. So just
Right.
knowing nuances there, even with simple questions, right?
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, I'm from, originally from the South in the US, and that's just like the standard greeting. How you doing? How you doing? And then
Hi,
the
how you
standard reply is good. How you doing? Good. How you doing? That's it. That's it. That's it. So
doing?
yeah, very often you see these kind of differences. Okay, so we've talked about these cultural differences, and again, the point is not to give you some type of template or some type of checklist, right? It's all about awareness, right? Knowing the game that we're playing, going back to that. But now we're going to talk about this next step of how to like actually jump in, how to engage, right? And this is going to be big because very often this tends to be the big challenge that we hear from a lot of people. Like, what do I do? Like, how do I go ahead and do it? I feel so comfortable in my natural language, but what about in English? Well, here we have kind of, another great meme, right? It's like very often we have these go-tos of like asking how your weekend was, and then Tuesday through Thursday we just hide, right? But there are some really great phrases that we can use to just jump in and to just go ahead. And I want you to, in the chat, let us know which of these, obviously context plays dependent, but which of these do you feel like seems like you, that seems like something I would say. I think for me, if I had to choose from these, either C or B, I think, for me to kind of like, if I'm just standing in a room and I need to strike up a conversation, like that's, I'm just going to go for one of these. But I'm curious to know, Paula, what would you choose? And then, yeah, everybody in the chat, what would you choose from this page here? What seems like the most you when it comes to starting small talk? What about you, Paula?
Yeah, I agree that C and B sound quite like you. I love C, and one of the things that I really like about C is that it focuses on the moment. So it's
Mm.
not about, hey, how are you? And this especially, we had a great guest on our podcast last year where we talked about how do you engage in small talk when you know the other person's going through something very difficult, like asking how are you is it's obvious I'm not doing well, was adding the word today. So how are you doing today? I know the situation is not great, but how are you doing today? And that was a very small change that actually made a big difference. So these are some great phrases. Again, we do training for not native English speakers, so these can be very perhaps easy or obvious for some of you, but we also want to offer that language support so that you can grab them and start using them. We have, I would say, B, C, maybe E, A, C, C, B, C. So we do have a bit of a variety here in terms of what you're all comfortable with. We have a recipe actually for small talk. Some people find it awkward, like how much information do I share? How do I do it? And so the recipe is very simple and it works for any sort of small talk question. When someone asks you a question, first give a very short answer. For example, if they ask, hey, how are you doing? How's your day going? Yeah, all good, thanks. Then you give a very small detail. Quite busy lately, but it should get better soon. And then, and this is key, you answer with a full question. How about you? How is everything? And here we can see it in different examples, right? Simon, what examples do we have where we can apply this?
Yeah, so we can see here, right? Like, two responses to how was your weekend, right? We have our response at the beginning that Alex gave, which is just like, All right, here we go, right? And then you have this other one, right? Which is, yeah, it was nice. I got some time to relax and walk along the beach. Good to recharge batteries before the week. How was your weekend, right? This is
Hmm.
like a whole different person here, right? This is like if Alex, had, just like the best weekend ever and came back refreshed and was actually nice to work with. So we like this version of Alex a lot better, right? But what happened here was it's exactly that recipe we just talked about on the previous slide, right? The short answer, the detail, and then giving a full question back. It's a simple, like if you think about it like a game of tennis, it's exactly that. You're receiving and then you're serving. You're receiving and then you're serving, right? So it's very, very just like that. And we can see another one, same concept, using the same context, the same template, right? I'm originally from Dorset. It's a nice small town, so more details, not too far from Dortmund. Where in England are you from? Full question back, right? I received and then I served again. So here we can use this same template again and again. And very often this helps if it's our second language because it gives us a little bit more time to kind of like add in some information. We can go a little bit slower because we're talking, and then we can ask a question back. And we feel like, we're really developing that conversation. So we don't need to be super quick. We just need to take our time, but ask the full question back. Even something like this, right? Like, nice weather today. If that's stretching and it's beautiful like every day, then, stretch it a little bit because in some places, the conversation of weather for small talk is actually like they actually do that. Like, in Denmark and in England and places where the weather is changing all the time, it actually matters to discuss this. So, you can always use this kind of recipe here to go through and make sure that you're building that conversation. Now, you know, again, how do we put this into the culture context, right? Well, we discussed before that, sometimes we want to be less or more personal depending on if it's a peach or coconut culture, right? So how do we navigate that? Paula, tell us a little bit about this kind of less to more personal scale.
Right. So if we're not too sure about the other person, we don't know them well, we don't know their communication style, we can start with something simple like how's the weather where you are, or how's your day going so far? Or I see it's football season over there. Do you watch? Do you have a favorite team? And then we can get a little bit more personal, like, oh, I just saw your cat running behind you. What's your cat's name? Pets are such a great small talk topic, especially if you also have one, then it's such a great bonding opportunity. Have you seen the show this on Netflix? I love it, you should watch it. Or sometimes if we feel like we can get a little bit more personal, hey, I heard about this natural disaster in your region, are you and your family okay? Is everything okay? That's also a thoughtful question. And we have, oh, I'm sorry about the noise, my kids are home, do you have children? Now, this can be a little bit too personal, so we need to know who we're talking to. Um, it's um, it's interesting. Someone asked before about India, and India has the three great F's for for small talk, and that would be food, festivals, and family. So they do tend to engage in conversation where they involve like talking about the next festival, talking about food, what's your favorite food, where are you cooking today? And then family, like, oh yeah, you're my kids. And so that is very common, but you need to know if you can get more into that personal side of things. Um, Great. So quick tip, if you don't want to answer a personal question, you can change the topic. Simon, how do we do this? How do we change the topic?
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, right? Someone may ask a question that goes kind of a little bit more personal, right? And how do we navigate that? Well, I mean, there's really kind of two ways. One is like confronting it head on and just being like, oh, I would rather not, share, and that's fine. You don't need to say, oh, wow, that's so unprofessional. I'd rather not share, right? But you could just say, I'd rather not discuss that actually, and then quickly follow back with another question. Another is to, briefly touch it and then, but not answer and just ask a question back, right? So in this case, right? Oh, I'm sorry about the noise. My kids are home. Do you have children? Oh, it's no problem. Do you usually work from home? And so if I don't want to address it, I can skip it and just push a question back onto that person, right? And you don't need to do it in a way that you seem tense or anything like that. Keep it upbeat, keep it light, but you can just brush past the question. Typically, people are going to get the hint that you don't want to answer that question. Like, I doubt this person would be like, no, no, no. I asked you if you had children. Do you really have children? Do you have children? You know what I mean? I doubt that would happen. Most people take the hint and they get that. So, again, just switching it back onto that person is a good way to change the topic. Um,
Yeah, but we
another,
have so
sorry, go ahead.
that is a great way to do it, especially with the tone that you mentioned. So it doesn't have to
Mhm.
be dropped, but it's just like, oh yeah, do you usually work from home? But if you do
Yeah.
need to address it in a way, we also have some phrases because this can be a very touchy, difficult topic. So sometimes you can say, oh, that's an interesting viewpoint. In our culture, however, discussing that can be a bit sensitive. And here we highlighted some words to soften the message. That's interesting. In our culture, it's a bit sensitive. Those are softeners. You can also say something like, oh, I see where you're coming from, but that comment might be misunderstood in contexts like this. So you're not addressing, oh, what you said is rude. You can say, it might be misunderstood in contexts like this. Or you can also say, I appreciate your curiosity. And here's something that is the essence of small talk. You want to be curious, you want to be interested in the other person. But you can tell them, but that's something we usually keep private in our culture. What is generally more accepted to do is this, or actually a great topic related to that is, and so if they ask you about kids, then you can focus on something that you do at home, but that is a little bit less personal, like food, for example. So yeah, here we'll send the slides later. These have been very helpful for me in the past. So if they are for you, then you're more than welcome to use them. Now, let's say you're on the other end of things, right? Like you've perhaps made a little mistake in a cross-cultural communication context. And Simon, what can we say?
Yeah, so, I think especially when we're communicating across cultures or when we're navigating cross-cultural communication, it's like, you know, anybody that tells you that they're always 100% perfect and they don't, commit any faux pas or they're just like, they've got it all handled, I wouldn't believe that person, right? Because there's just so many differences. There's so many small nuances across cultures, and the best tip that I can give is to like practice what I call like honest curiosity, right? Like I'm just like being honestly curious, right? And so if I'm asking a question, you know, it's because I'm like doing my best to be honest and at the same time curious. Like I'm not trying to, cross lines. I'm not trying to do, anything like that. I'll do that to the best of my ability. And most of the time, people will understand that and they'll respect that, right? So like, I've been in many situations cross-culturally where looking back on it, I've been like, oh, like maybe that could have been taken the wrong way, or maybe I shouldn't have asked that question. Like I love traveling and really digging into the culture. So sometimes it can maybe feel a bit rushed, if I'm really trying to learn a lot. And so, you can do a lot of different things. Like, you can just say, hey, oh, I'm sorry if that's too personal. I didn't, sorry for asking, right? I've used that if someone like gets really, kind of shells up. Like, you can always just say like, oh, I hope I didn't overstep. I'm just, I'm always interested in learning. And most of the time people want to share, they want to teach about their culture because it's something they truly value. So if you kind of show that honest curiosity, many times people will kind of, yeah, get over it and then kind of move forward. All right, so let's get into our final section here before we wrap it up, and that's about ending small talk. So when is the right time to end small talk? So if you're in the chat, I want you to let us know what's that signal that you look for, or what's like your personal kind of go-to of like, when do I transition? Like, when do I make that move? I mean, I think this is always an interesting one because it's like, it can be different. Some people like have that kind of signal, if they see that difference, they'll think, okay, like now we're done. Now the small talk's over. I don't know. How's it for you, Paula? Is there like a signal or something that you look for?
Mhm. I love what Gabriela just said. Before the time allotted for the meeting ends, hopefully, or that was a great one. So you always want to end on a positive note, and you
Yeah,
want to end energized, right? Because usually after small talk, you actually have a serious business conversation. So you want to have that connection. You want to make sure that the conversation is you're in a good mood. So you've exchanged a few questions back and forth, and then before it starts to slow down, before it starts to go down and fade away, before that happens, then you can just use one of the phrases we have and just end there.
yeah.
We also have when the other person starts looking at their watch, interesting one.
Okay.
When the body
Yeah,
language, this one is also very interesting, right? I watch the body language of the other person. That shows a lot as well. Like they might
yeah,
be looking away, or
yeah,
they might be a little bit less engaged than at the beginning. Those are great cues to know. All right, it's time to move
yeah.
on.
Time to move on. Great. Yeah, so ending small talk, and we have again, we're gonna send you the slides, but there's a ton of great phrases, right? So, anyways, I suppose we should get started. Like, you know, great. So, how can I help you today, right? So, like, these are some really good ones. For me, I want you to let us know which ones from this list are your favorite. For me, I would say probably, yeah, like B. I think for me is like the one that I would go to the most. What about you, Paula?
I don't think we've added it here, the one that I use the most. I like to say, anyway, I don't want to steal too much of your time. That's always great.
Yeah.
I respect your time. I know you must be super busy. So
That's
that's,
E. There you go. You got E, right?
oh, there you go. I don't want to take
Yeah.
up any more of your time. I think that's a great one. It
Yeah.
respects the other person, it shows respect, and it's such a great way of saying I respect you. So let's actually
Yeah.
get this.
Yeah. All right. So let's get to our final part. And see, I just did it right there. I just did this transition, right? All right. So let's get to it. I don't know which one that was, maybe B, but we have so much going on here. And again, you're going to get all of this content, which is like super valuable. So we'll send it over in an email. And you're going to get as well links to all of these different sources that we use all the time. But if you are curious about Talaera training for either yourself or for your team, or if you want to bring it into your company, right? If this is something that you think like, oh my gosh, this team in this country would be great with, or if you've just sat through this and you're like, wow, okay, I know exactly the person who's horrible with small talk that would benefit from this. Well, there's so much that we have right here, and we'll send you all of the links to all of our training and how you can get in touch with us. But we do have different training, right? We have one-on-one training, you and a teacher matched together to like your specific level and your career. And then we have like groups and workshops where we're like focusing on very specific pain points for the company. And this goes down to like very clear ROI for like what is the problem and how can we get a solution, through our business English training. I mean, we work with companies like all over the world that have these cross-cultural challenges and that actually have a real business impact. So we work with these and we work to kind of really get a clear impact there. Webinars like this you can get for your company as well. Like if you are a Talaera customer, you can give a webinar and get a webinar for free. So there's like a lot of these things going on. And then if you are interested in our self-paced courses, so a lot of material, just what you saw today, you can actually join for free up until the end of the year. So you have like 3 weeks left. Just go to our self-paced online courses and you can just sign up for free. Like it's just there ready for you, right? So you can absolutely go and do that as well. You can get on some of our weekly speaking classes where you can, talk with, I think Paula's on them sometimes and a bunch of different people. So those are always really, really cool. So yeah, a lot of fun. And it's all there for you. I think the biggest thing for us that we always talk about is that feedback is huge for us. It is super, super important. So please, if you can, just scan this QR code and then give us some feedback. And this is going to help us improve so that next time, if there's a topic that you want to learn more about, or if there's something else that you want to learn more about, we can make that happen for you. And I think, we're very feedback driven. So, we can take it, let us know. If you're like, yeah, Paula, she's just amazing, but that Simon guy doesn't stop talking and looks like he'd be pretty bad at small talk anyways. So you're probably right. Let us know. We can handle it. All right, I'll quit talking. Did I forget anything, Paula, before we wrap?
And you did such a great job. I have a question for everyone listening. Do you have a question for us? We have a few more minutes left. Now it's now is the time. I dropped a couple of links in the chat. I see quite a few of you already clicking. So if you have any questions, let us know about this topic, about anything else we mentioned. Laura just asked, I know you mentioned that politics should be avoided. What if this is a topic a learner wants to explore for vocabulary purposes? So this is a totally different context, right? This is more like
Mm,
teacher learner. I think here, as long as you treat it from what it is, then that is fine. So we're not really making real small talk in there. It's important to know the rules to establish that relationship. So if you don't have a good relationship with that person, if you don't know them well, if you don't have that code or that set of norms, I would stay away from it because it can go wrong very easily. Once you build that relationship, then it's like with any relationship, right? Who's going to tell you what you should talk and not talk about with friends and close
yeah.
people, close contacts. But in general, it's just not a safe topic to talk about at work.
Yeah.
Awesome. What else? What other questions? I like this one. What's your strategy when connecting with people from a very different culture? Like short versus long small talk culture. Do you find the middle ground? Are you clear about the differences? I'm super curious about what you think, but I do think there's value in saying, hey, this is how we usually communicate. This is what this usually means for me, and I'm open to adapting. But just so you know, this is where I come from. One of my students back in the day, we worked on a little blurb that she wanted to add to her Slack profile, and where she was saying, hey, listen, I come from a very direct culture. I just want to learn about you and I'll try to adapt. So if I come off as rude, it's really nothing against you. It's just the way we communicate in our culture. And I thought it was fantastic. But Simon, do you have any strategies to answer Susanna?
Yeah, I mean, I think like, think about with the peach and the coconut culture, observe that now that you know the game, take the sign and then think, okay, with the coconut culture, it's maybe going to be a long game. So be prepared for that. Be prepared to like, slowly invest over a long period of time, asking one or two questions and then continuing to kind of, build. I think if I'm coming from, one of the biggest things that I try to do right away, if I'm meeting someone from a different culture, is just try to find similarity on anything. If I see anything like, that clues me in that there's a similarity, we start from there because very often they may feel the same way of like, whoa, this is like different way of speaking, different communication. Immediately, if you can find similarity as humans, we automatically associate that with trust, and then we start to go from there. So as much as you can to find anything that you can, feel similar about, and then just take it from there. Yeah.
I like that. I like that. And always remembering that small talk truly is about building connections, like building rapport and making
Yeah.
connections. So yeah, we really hope you learn to at least a tiny little something that you can apply tomorrow directly at work or right after this webinar. Um, Thank you so much for the feedback. I see already a lot of responses, so we truly appreciate that. We'll read every single piece of it. And if you have any questions, if you want to, keep learning for free, you can do that. And if you're interested in taking it to the next level, we are here. I'm going to drop our email. We get back pretty much immediately. either myself or part of our team. So hello@talaera.com if you're interested in any of the things we talked about today. But otherwise, next month we have a webinar. I'm actually pretty excited about that one. I don't know why I say that. I am always excited about the
You
topics that
weren't excited for this one? What are you talking about?
I know, right? But then at the end of the day, we are the ones picking the topics based on
There
what
you
people
go.
react to. So it's like, they're always so much fun. But it is going to be about constructive feedback. So if you're interested, I will see you January the 24th. And until then, Simon, what should we say? Just like
As
the way.
always, everyone, thank you all. And, we always end all of our webinars with a big keep learning. So everyone, keep learning. Thank you all. I had a great time today, and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah, see you on the next one. All right.